So now we're going to go into a live demonstration of using Oracle ERP Cloud with a focus on access management, as Navinder and Jane had mentioned. I'm Bob Enders. I'm a senior director here with SafePaaS, and I'll be conducting the demonstration for this today's session. So I'm going to log into the application. And this is our website. You go to our website, you can log in from our website or using the URL. So I'm going to go into our demonstration environment. And the first thing you see is an inbox for the user that I'm logging in. I'm a demo admin, and also the access that's available to that particular user. Each user will have a unique view into the application based on their role in the organization. You'll notice in the inbox we have quite a few workflow notifications. SafePaaS uses workflow quite extensively. It helps with large organizations when you're trying to manage risk within the organization. When you're very large and you have multiple individuals that process, workflow provides that proactive notification of risks or changes that have been made within your application. As I mentioned, we're going to focus on access management, which is our SafePaaS solution. And we're going to go into various aspects of the components. And every list here has a drop down. So we're going to go into Enterprise Access Monitor. And we're going to just kind of walk you through some of the components of SafePaaS or ERP Cloud. So the first thing I want to do is start out with the scope. Scope is where we establish how the application operates. In this particular instance, the SOD rules that are important to an organization. We have a concept called snapshots, and snapshots are data within your ERP at a point in time. And so when the data is brought across into SafePaaS, it'll create a separate snapshot. So if I open up the rules, and I'm going to select ERP Cloud, and as you'll notice, we support multiple different ERP applications. Oracle EBS, NetSuite, Microsoft, SAP. So once again, we support almost any application. We're pretty much application agnostic. So if I click on the ERP Cloud environment, it gives me the rules that are in our demo environment. I want to point out a couple things. First, I want to drill down into a specific SOD rule and just kind of help you understand the various components. The components here are all user defined. We have a catalog that you can use as a starting point, but everything here is defined when you set up the application. But when you start looking at the different activities or functions within the ERP, you'll notice there's multiple lines. So we allow for a broader coverage with a single SOD rule that compares a person's access to one or many functions within their access responsibility. We track exceptions, which I'll show you in a little bit. Also, we have individuals that are responsible or the control owner for this SOD rule. Also, we track history. So if there's any changes made to an SOD rule, it will go through the process of the control owner approving it before it actually takes effect. I'm just going to go back out to the next level. I also want to point out one of the SOD rules we have here is invoice using Oracle and Workday. We provide cross-application SOD monitoring. So if you're using, in this particular case, Oracle ERP Cloud and Workday for certain parts of your business requirements, we can do an SOD analysis across those different applications. So that way, if an individual has access to both, you can validate to make sure that they're not violating any of the SOD policies within your organization. Okay. The next thing I want to do is just kind of show you some of the violations. We allow for the maintenance of multiple tests. So as you do your analysis, you can have different tests based on the different snapshots that are being processed. Also, we can look at the actual violations themselves. So I'm going to pick the environment again, go to Oracle ERP Cloud, and I'm going to select one of the tests that we run in our demo environment. So I'm just picking the one that was run on the 23rd, and it gives you all the different violations that were generated from that analysis. We identify the different exception types, because what I'm trying to do with the exceptions is to identify false positives that are access that are necessary for the business, and I put some compensated controls in place, or I allowed a waiver that allows an individual to have that level of access. And so you can identify the exception type. So in this case, I'm going to say exception by user, use this as an example, but it can be by role, it can be by form, it can be by buyer. The scope, whether it's global or all, global means all the different SOD rules, or just local, those are specified in your selection. I can select all, or I can select this certain ones that I'm looking for. So let's use an example of, I know there's a user in IT that's causing a lot of violations. And here I'm just going to click on the username. And so I have all the different users that are causing violations. And I'll just grab an individual and it'll identify those violations. And I can select all. And so I've identified those violations. And now I'm going to go through the process of creating that exception. And so what I do is I go to the submit button. And it'll give me the opportunity justification. It could be an IT waiver. It could be a compensating control. And the real benefit of using exceptions is that it fixes the violation on the current analysis that you're reviewing, and it'll also affect future analyses because you've identified the violation and the exception associated with that violation, and it'll, in future analyses, it'll exclude it from your violations that are being generated. And then I would submit it for approval. And this would route it to the different SOD control owners. It'll be up to them to make a determination if this exception is valid for their control. We also provide the same capabilities for corrective actions. So if you're looking to deprovision the user or change a role, you can use the corrective actions capabilities to provide that. So if I go back into drop downs, what I want to do next is, now we know the violations, I want to have a better view of the violations that I have within my application. So I'm going to use the same test, and what we provide out of the box are a set of dashboards that help with devising the remediation strategy. A lot of cases you'll have could have thousands of violations or maybe tens of thousands, and looking at rows and columns makes it a little bit difficult to interpret. And so here I give the opportunity to look at which components I want to focus my remediation efforts on, or what my strategies will look like. Here we provide out of the box the 10 top SOD rules with violations. So I'd see that 16.1% of those are related to enter journals and set up general ledgers. So I want to look as to why I have so many violations. Do too many users have too much access? We track the exceptions. We also have top 10 users with violations. This one's really important because it helps you quickly understand what individuals are causing the greatest number of violations. And so if you see a specific individual, so for instance, if I know some of these individuals in IT, I know they're false positives and they're causing violations, I may want to initiate the exclusion directly from this graph. So if I double click on the graph itself, it'll take me into the minus violation screen, allowing me to remediate those violations. And then also we have last 5 tests. As you go through the process of remediating violations within your organizations, it'll identify how you're improving with managing those violations. Next thing I want to do is kind of cover some of the reports that we provide. We provide quite a few reports. What's really important for these reports is they can all be configured specifically for each user. So in my case, I may want to look at the same data differently than the vendor does. So if I'm going to look at violations by user report, just to kind of give you an example, pick the same ERP Cloud, same results, and this gives me all the violations once again, so I can view that information to understand the violations and drill down into the details I need to do to remediate those violations. As I mentioned, you can put multiple reports, violation by rules 1. So now I've got the SOD rules. Once again, each user can create the report output in a format that they're comfortable with using. As I also want to point out, you can put filters. You can, format the report. Here we got a chart. We can change that. If I go to the original raw data, I can rearrange the columns or eliminate columns from the report. So I may not need the session ID, for instance, or ID, or I want to move the activity to the top. And so I can make those changes, apply it, then save that. Once again, I can make this output specific to how I review that information. We also provide our summary report. And this report's really helpful when you start drilling down into the violations. What is the actual cause? In this particular case, you got Mr. Hilton, who's violating the crate supplies or received goods, but it's also identifying which of the permissions or privileges that or functions, depending on your terminology, that person has that is causing that violation. So now I got to look into what do I need to do to address that? Is it something that is necessary for the business? So I may want to initiate an exclusion with a compensating control identified, or I may want to change that person's access to eliminate that type of violation. Also, a violation matrix by user. Once again, these are just these are reports that come out of the standard with SafePaaS. So here we've got a different view of violations by user. That's one of the custom reports. And then once again, there's raw data that we can review. Also have several other reports. A lot of cases, the individuals that are responsible for remediating violations don't necessarily have direct access into the ERP to look at all the elements that would impact an SOD violation. So here we've got the report user listing and their access. So I know what an individual has access to. User entry access listing. So I know what individuals, what their entry name is or role that they have access to. So once again, these are all reports coming directly out of the ERP that a user can use to understand the violations and devise a strategy to mediate those violations. We have our entry listings. These are all the roles and what they provide. Also have access hierarchy. If I grab, I'm just going to search by invoice. So it'll give you a navigation path into the different functions that are associated with this particular role. Let's get, these are some of the capabilities that SafePaaS provides. The objective in this particular, what I've shown you so far, is to identify the SOD violations, but also how do I devise my remediation strategy to manage those violations. That kind of leads to the next component of the solution I want to cover. We also have our roles manager solution. Roles manager is in a lot of cases, depending on how the role is designed, maybe causing violations within themselves. And through roles manager, you're able to identify and change those roles based on the violations that are being generated. So instead of making the change in the ERP and not being sure what the changes will affect from a violation standpoint, you can do that all within SafePaaS. We also have our access monitor. Access monitor is for identifying users by the business process owners who have access into different parts of the application. So once again, those are some of our remediation tools that help an organization address some of the violations or the causes of the violations that are being generated by the ERP analysis. The next thing I want to just kind of take you through the process. We've identified the violations. We've shared with you ways to address some of those violations. And the goal is to eventually get to the point where you can minimize or eliminate violations. And that comes with our user provisioning capabilities that we provide within SafePaaS. So in order to demo that, I wanted to log into a different user real quickly. So I've logged into a different user. Obviously, you see the same information that you see, the same inbox, look and feels the same, but obviously there's different notifications. What I want to show you is iAccess, which we provide for user provisioning. So I'm going to request access. I've already initiated the process because one of the things that comes out of iAccess is we do an SOD analysis. And to do that at this session would take a little bit longer than expected. So I'm going to pick a user, just take you through the process. I'm going to pick Tony Smith because I've already initiated that request. So I click on Go. It's thinking. And so it gives me all the information related to Tony. Obviously his manager's name, his username, all the different responsibilities or roles that Tony has access to. So I'm going to click on Next. And from here, I've got the opportunity to end date Tony's access. So if I want to use automate the deprovisioning process, you can do that with iAccess also. And these are all the roles and responsibilities that are available that can be assigned to Tony, because there is a security component that we provide that helps control what they possibly can be given access to. Also want to point out that we have a firefighter capability, which is for your privileged users. And so, for instance, your IT department, has super user capabilities. That's always a risk to the organization because in a lot of cases it's unfettered. But if I click Enable Firefighter, it'll give me those roles that I consider to be firefighter roles that I want to assign on a temporary basis, but also do a follow-up compliance report as to what that user had access to. So if I just grab the super user, move it across, click on Next, automatically end dates that user's access. Then I can submit it. Well, I've already submitted it. I don't want to do it again. I just want to take you through the rest of the process. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to go to my inbox. Since I initiated this process yesterday, and I set up the workflow to come to me twice actually, just for demonstration purposes. So I can go down and click on the hyperlink, look at the request. Importantly, I can go look at the SOD violations that are being generated by giving Tony that request. Now that can be within the role itself, or it could be what other roles or responsibilities that you currently have. I can reject it with a comment as to why. Maybe there's a reason why, but I can approve it and send it to the next approval level. SafePaaS has up to 5 levels of approval, but currently for the demo environment we have just 3. So I clicked on Go, and as I mentioned, it came back. I had my user set up as the same person that's going to get that access. What I want to do just real quickly is jump over into my email. I just want to point out a couple of things. What happens when you submit somebody's request, it sends out an email to the actual requester, in this case Tony Smith, as he's being given that access. Then also it'll send it to the approver and the hierarchy. So now in this case, it sends an email to my user. If I'm not logged in, I can use a hyperlink to log in directly and review and approve that request. Going back into the application, I'm going to approve this again. As I mentioned, it came back I set up to come back to me twice. All the information is the same. I'm going to approve it again. And so now it's no longer in my inbox, but I want to mention a couple things before we move on. If I go into SafePaaS, and I go to Access Monitor, and I go to Setup, Provision User Access, we have a request status. And request status is an audit trail of who had reviewed and approved every request that are used through iAccess. So that way you have a validation that the appropriate individuals had done the review and approval of that access. So this can be report can be generated anytime. So just to kind of finalize, I'm going to log back in as my alter ego. seems like my user, someone's changed my user password. I just want to go back into my email real quickly as I was describing previously. And these iAccess notifications were being generated. It sent a request to my user, and also informing Mr. Smith of the status of his request. That's all I had planned for the demonstration